Welcome back to the House Environment Committee. We are going to change topics to S212 with a new draft from Legislative Council.
This is Michael Grady with Legislative Council. You should have draft 2.2 with a 4/21 date and a 1:29 p.m. timestamp. How would you like me to walk through?
Just high level, Ryan, remind us what we're talking about, but then go to the sections that have changed.
Sure. So the high level that the bill does, it has two major parts. One relates to permitting of potable water supply and wastewater system connections to buildings. And the other relates to the authority of A&R to delegate pre-treatment discharge permitting to a municipality underneath a delegation agreement. The general permit authority does a couple of things. For several years, there has been an effort to streamline, improve, make more efficient the permitting of wastewater and potable water supply system connections to existing structures. You have tried several ways to do that through full delegation, through partial delegation, through and designated downtowns. None of that has worked. No municipality currently has full delegation. No municipality sought partial delegation, and the designated downtown authority, to my knowledge, was never exercised either. You're repealing all of that. And in place of that, you're directing A&R to adopt a general permit for connections, potable water supply, and wastewater system connection to structures. Part of that permit, they are going to issue a manual on how to do connections, more intuitive, maybe a little bit more picture-based. And they're going to define what constitutes capacity for the purposes of connections for a system, because that is not as clear of an issue as you may think. And so that's the general permit. One other part of the general permit authority is giving the division authority to do additional general permits. In a previous draft, there was, and what passed the Senate, you gave them authority to do general permits for low impact. Can't remember, there was 3 lows. And you were concerned that that wasn't enough detail specifics on what activities would be allowed underneath the general permit. So I can't remember who communicated it to whom, but Brian Redmond asked his staff at the division to contemplate on what would be appropriate activities for general permits. And they proposed those activities, and those activities are in here as discretionary general permit authority for the division. So that's generally 10,000 foot level, what it does for general permitting of connections. For pre-treatment, remember there was that whole discussion about what was that agreement in 1982 regarding pre-treatment between EPA and A&R, and whether that limited the ability of A&R to delegate pre-treatment to municipalities. EPA said no, it does not. Consequently, you are authorizing A&R to delegate pre-treatment permit discharging to municipalities under an agreement. That agreement gives the municipality the ability to set fees. And that's really what that agreement does. That's really what the pre-treatment authority does. One thing that's in the version of the draft in front of you right now is a contingency effective date that's left over from the discussion about whether or not EPA was going to approve it or not. That can come out entirely. I don't know how I missed it, but I missed it until earlier today. It just doesn't need to be in there anymore.
Where's that, Michael?
That is at the very end of the bill. that is section 8, page 14 of the draft. Thank you. I do have a couple of little like technical kind of widgety questions for A&R about how they would do delegation and whether or not language needs to be in statute or whether it will be covered by the delegation agreement. But I mean, I don't know when you're going to vote on that. I can probably track them down.
I guess though, what, can we look at the new language?
Sure. So the new language for general permitting, that is on page 4.
And this is taking the place of that
Low impact, yes. The low impact,
more clear description of the kind of
Yes.
things you were thinking of.
the specific activities. And the first would be on page 4, line 20. They may adopt a general permit for the subdivision of land when no building structure or campground exists on or is proposed for the property at the time of subdivision. As you may know, and as you can see in this bill, it's not here anymore. Well, initially, whenever you subdivide a parcel of property to create new lots, you have to identify an area for a system, including an area for a replacement area for a system. So that there isn't unchecked subdivision without appropriate ability to deal with the health issues of providing water, sewer.
So when did we start doing that? Requiring that you could show that you could build on a lot before you subdivide it?
Well, you went to universal jurisdiction in 2001. And that was a phased in universal jurisdiction. You didn't really fully have that until 2005, 2006.
Universal, just, you're saying that's the term for requiring that you're,
That's the term for state jurisdiction over potable water supply and wastewater. Before that, it was done at the municipal level. And that there was a patchwork of standards. And that led to, all of the stories you probably heard, the Volkswagen bug that was a septic tank, the pipes that allegedly led to systems but didn't go anywhere.
I can add to that.
sure.
I'm sorry. Bruce Douglas, the Department of Environmental Conservation, Drinking Water and Groundwater Protection Division, the wastewater program manager. So overseeing this regulatory program we're discussing, the general permits for not the pre-treatment permits, the municipal connections and on-site wastewater and water supply systems. Essentially, back around 1970 is when the state originally took jurisdiction over subdivisions for less than 10-acre lots. So the state has been regulating subdivisions of less than 10-acre lots for over 50 years. And that started with the health department and moved over to DEC in the 80s. And so that's a fundamental, that's the first permit trigger. And then as Michael pointed out, in 2002, the legislature took away that 10-acre loophole. That's where the towns, well, they could or could not regulate subdivision. There's an option, and how they did it was up to them. So that's the brief history of subdivision.
And I love, thanks for Bruce, because one of the terms that the 10-acre lot is called the spaghetti lot. If you've ever heard of that, because they were just these long 10-acre lots that were all next to each other. And they got around the state permit.
Mm.
And so this would allow the division to do a general permit for that subdivision when there's no structure there already and there's no proposed structure. I mean, think about it. It's probably gonna be pretty efficient for them to do that. Like, this is what you need to do when you do that subdivision. You need to provide on this form a map or a diagram of where your design is gonna be and how far it's gonna be from the boundary and whether it meets the setback requirements. And I think I could see that working, and I've seen things like that.
Like, could I add to that?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. One, in addition to if someone's proposing to build, they need to, or has a building on the lot, identify wastewater, water supply system capacity. But if you're not planning on building a structure or putting up a campground, you can subdivide land, sell 5, 20, 50 acres to your neighbor, and you'll get a permit. As Michael said, it just requires the map, showing where it is, but you have specific language in that permit that this is not a permit for development of the lot. And development of the lot will require, following the rules to obtain the permit, and this does not guarantee the land will be suitable for development. So that little disclaimer has been around for.
So you're not imagining then that this licensed professional is gonna, they're not saying you could actually dispose of wastewater on that site.
Not if nothing's being proposed, if there's no,
So why do we need it if nothing's being proposed?
basically to have that clarity in the
People know
language
that.
on that goes with the records, the land records that says this lot was created but has not been determined to have capacity, and you need to come in for a permit if you would like to build it. But I bought a lot for my neighbor. No plans to develop it, but I wanted, because I didn't want to have to hire a designer or anything. It wasn't my intent. It's just a
Right.
piece of property across the street from mine. And I've got that language on the record. So if some future owner tries to sell it and wants to do something with it, they'll have to, if they don't want to just have it for a buffer on their property, they will need to get a permit. So it really makes that explicit.
Yeah, okay. Representative Austin.
So why would someone sell or buy a lot and not know if it doesn't perk? It wouldn't perk. I mean, it seems like it would be worth a lot more money if someone knew it would perk.
It is, but if some people aren't buying it to develop it, they're buying it because they, like my case,
Right.
it's a buffer. They know no one's gonna build across the street from my house. And therefore, some people may buy it for a woodlot.
Right.
I want 50 acres for a woodlot, you own 200 acres, can I buy the lot?
But isn't that risky for a buyer and a seller? Like, if you're a seller, you could, if you don't know if it perks, you're gonna sell it for a lot less.
Right,
And so it's just a lucky guess whether it perks.
that's a gamble that some people take.
Wow.
Um,
That's a big gamble.
It
to
is.
me.
So that's why I see a benefit of having the requirement to have that lot, on the record that doesn't have the capacity.
Right.
So that's agreed to, essentially by both parties by
Oh,
the permit that the land has it. The buyer knows what they're getting and the seller knows what they're selling.
Okay, go ahead.
So moving on to the next one, I think Bruce probably should be talking about this. This is boundary line adjustments. When you're going to be adjusting your boundary and it could affect the permitting of your neighbor or your own permitting. There's provisions in the rules about when you need a permit or when you get an exception from the permit. And Bruce, you want to talk about how to do this?
Sure, well, so basically, let's just say two parcel owners, there's a row of trees that everyone thought was the property line, and then one of the property owners does a survey and realizes it's not the row of trees I either own more or less than I thought I had. Talks to the neighbor, they agree we like the row trees. Let's change the boundary line from the actual surveyed location to what we're all comfortable with, and that's just, all you're doing is you're adjusting the boundary, might be 10 feet, might be 100 feet. But that needs, we don't want to preclude one or the other lot's capacity for wastewater if one of those lots is developed. So, or if one of those lots has a permit. So if there is a desire for wastewater capacity, just want to make sure that change is minimal. So it doesn't affect, either property owner, or if it is significant, that there is at least, room available for the developed property or the permitted property to do what they want in the future. So when we've handled this in the past, is that, we, rule by rule, we say 2%, no change, decrease in land by 2%, or this boundaries to be 500 feet away from all. With this, we don't want to get that prescriptive, because that 2% might not be the ideal number. It's just a number that's been used for the last 19 years. So instead, we should say we'll develop a general permit for boundary line adjustments, and then come up with whatever the criteria would be, and put that out for public comment. And based on, as we have to for any general permit, and then based on the public comment, you could make appropriate adjustments.
I guess I'm not understanding why someone needs a permit to adjust their boundary line with their neighbor.
Well, right now it's okay. So now it's an exception. If it's less than 2% or greater than 500 feet away from your property. If you're decreasing
500 feet away from your property.
from that property, for your building or structure,
Oh.
for your proposed building or structure. So basically saying that's like the limited. No one's going to build a well further than 500 feet from their house, or put their leach field further than 500 feet from their house. So that's the reason for the 500 feet. So you don't need a permit if you have those current exemptions, and we're not planning on changing those exemptions now. There is, though, in our rule, if you don't meet those, then you have to submit documentation of why you're not precluding the ability of water and sewer for the existing house or the proposed structure.
I think that's an important part that you might not be understanding, because remember, when you put in a well or a wastewater system, there are isolation distances, or some people call them the well shadow or the overshadow, that you can't put another system within that distance of the well or the wastewaters. And that can prevent development, including development on neighboring property. So if you're going to adjust your property line to the point where your overshadow, your well shadow, your setback is going to affect the development on your neighboring property, they're just saying they want to have conditions for that and a permit, so that it's clear on how that will be done, so that you don't create those issues. You don't create the spite well. You don't create the people screaming at you the way that they did like 10 years ago when spite wells were a thing.
Basically, sorry, go
You're
ahead.
only doing a boundary line adjustment when you both agree to it.
Sorry.
You're only doing a boundary line adjustment when you both agree to it.
Correct, but someone who may not be aware of the fact that that's their best soils, the only suitable area for a leach field, and they didn't know that's their backup plan. And if a designer could come in and say, look at the site and saying, we want to preserve that area, and here's how we're going to do, or we're going to show another area that's suitable. You can't put an in-ground system in where you wanted to. You can put a bound somewhere else. Is that acceptable?
So today, if you didn't meet those 2% and 500 feet, you would need to get a permit.
You would need to get the secretary approval. So it's not in our current rules, it's not a permit. It is you need to submit the documentation, and the secretary, our regional engineers, have to make a determination based on that information that it's acceptable. And but you don't have to hire a licensed designer. And that's the big rub. What we'd like to do is hand this over from being the responsibility of the regional engineers, the secretary's staff, to the licensed designer, and defer to them. people who are trained to do this, who individuals can hire, and make that call, say, this works, this meets your criteria, and you can get a general permit for it, rather than this approval. It's an approval letter that the secretary is required to write. Someone doesn't meet those criteria, and they submit a request.
So the state, so people have to hire someone to do this.
Right now, you only have to hire a surveyor. We would,
But if we do the general permit,
if we do a general permit, yes.
And
We'd
the-
have to hire, or we could say that if. Yeah, we had to have the details of that, but yes, then you always have to have a surveyor. And if there's a reason to address the water supply issues, you should hire a designer. If they're the best qualified people to make the call.
okay. Next,
Next category would be for permitting of a potable water supply system with a design flow of less than 1,000 gallons per day. And there's no other requirement for a variance, hydrogeologic analysis, or yield testing of a potable water source. So this relatively small capacity where there's no other significant issue that would require further analysis. To move to the next.
do folks have questions on this one? Representative Osborne?
Just does, at my view, does capacity determine how many bedrooms a house can have?
Right, for an individual property, yep, the design flow
Yep.
capacity is based on that.
And so 1,000 gallons a day, is that like for a 1-bedroom or a 3-bedroom?
Excellent question. For a 4-bedroom house is 490 gallons per day. So 2 4-bedroom houses would be 980 gallons per day, just under this limit.
Hmm.
You could have that, or you could have maybe a 5-bedroom house with a 3-bedroom accessory dwelling unit, or whatever combination
Interesting.
you want to do. But there's a variety of ways of addressing it.
Thank you.
And so the next category is similar general permit for a wastewater system that has a design flow of less than 1,000 gallons per day and does not require innovative or alternative technologies unless those are allowed by the Secretary of Variance or hydrogeologic analysis.
And this is different from what we do now, how?
So right now, everything is an individual permit. Regardless of the technology, but we do approve, and this is the legislature requested in the universal jurisdiction, is innovative alternative technologies, which may be as simple as a novel leach field system. They make plastic chambers. If you can't get a truck into your backyard, you can carry these chambers, and install them in lines. That's an innovative technology, but that's an example of one that the secretary may say that could be general permit. Whereas some are treatment units, small backyard treatment units that people have to overcome their site condition. They have to be inspected annually, and they're getting that treatment unit to either make the leach field smaller or closer to the water table. They're substituting technology for soils in a land area. And that it's a little more careful review. So that's is being excluded from the general permit is the intent there. And as a variance would be a failed system. So the system's failed and you have to be too closer than the rules require to a water system or to a boundary line, whatever, you would need a variance. And therefore, again, it's need for more closer oversight, and so that would be excluded also.
So those are the category of general permits that are discretionary. And then on page, let's just skip the pre-treatment, which is page 13. So you're out of the potable water supply and wastewater system.
There's a minor change, that's page 7.
Pardon me?
The minor change I'm seeing on page.
There's two minor changes. I've just skipped over them. Page 11, line 11. This is the fee authority for the general permit connections. It had previously said potable water supply or wastewater system connections. And maybe this wasn't clear, that general permit is when you have both. It's not, you just have one or the other, it's when you have both those types.
What page and line number are you on?
Page 11,
Oh, I was on 7. Sorry.
page 11, line 11.
I'm in order.
So what the department had intended is that the general permit will be when there's connections for both your potable water supply and your wastewater to a structure. So to avoid people trying to gain a connection. And so that it had said or there, and so that was changed to and.
Can we go back to page 7?
Sure. That is a change from passive voice to active voice. It had said shall be in court, the municipality delegated authority, the manual shall be incorporated into the municipality's permit. And so the editors did not like that. And said the municipality's delegated authority shall incorporate the requirements of the Secretary's general permit into a municipal connection approval, including deference to the certified designers.
Okay. Thank you.
And I am supposed to write an active voice, but I am have a law.
Representative Chafin.
I'm sorry, but isn't shall be incorporated and shall incorporate sort of the flip of each other? Like, is the authority being incorporated into the requirements, or the requirements are being incorporated into the authority?
So they shall incorporate the requirements of the general permit into the approval. It's like saying they will incorporate those requirements into their permit.
It's like we're missing some commas there. Municipalities, comma. Delegated authority under this section shall incorporate, right? The little phrase delegated authority under this section means is a modifier on the municipalities. That's the way I'm reading it, right?
Could we say a municipality that is delegated authority under this section shall incorporate the requirements?
Yes. Is that what the way you were reading it?
Yeah, I actually, in the original document, it says shall be required to incorporate. So that's different than shall be incorporated. So now I don't see a discrepancy. I'm good. Thank you.
Are we okay?
Good.
And that takes you to the pre-treatment language. Page 13. So first change in the authority for the secretary to delegate, it had to enter an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. And the city didn't like that. And I empathize with that because there is always a question of whether or not something that's of an understanding binding. And so it was changed to an agreement with the owner to delegate to the owner of the POTW authority to regulate pre-treatment discharges to the POTW. And then anywhere where it had referenced MOU has been changed to agreement.
And has the agency seen this language and is okay with it? These were requests from Burlington, right?
Yes, the agency has seen this version of the language. But I have not had an opportunity to ask the agency, and it would be either Neil or Kevin, my questions on it. And my questions, as I said, are kind of widgety. They're not, they wouldn't preclude you from going forward. It's just whether or not it would be better or not. And specifically, it's the page 13, line 21, 22, where it says the environmental division shall have the same jurisdiction to review the actions of the owner of a POTW delegated pretreatment authority. That's the appeal provision. And when you have authorized delegation in the past, you've not included language like that. Where it's been included is in the delegation agreement. And I have examples of those, the Caspian, Lakeshore Lands, the Newport Harbor, where how the appeal is going to be handled is written into the delegation agreement, and it's not written into statute. I think Burlington could live without that, but it's also about whether or not you want to be clear that these delegations are going to be adjudicated or issues under them are going to be adjudicated in the environmental division. I could go either way. That's why I wanted to ask the agency. To me, it's
Burlington wants this.
Burlington wants it. They want it to be clear.
Okay.
And my argument is it's already clear because this entire chapter is by law appealable in the environmental division. And just because there's a delegation doesn't mean that it's no longer appealable in the environmental division. But Burlington's point is like, but nobody would know that from this. I'm like, well, nobody knows how to do A&R appeals anyway. So, because remember, all of A&R's appeals are in one chapter of law. They're not in each individual chapter. So you read each individual chapter and you're like, how do I appeal? You need to know that you have to go to the one chapter on appeals. And then the other question was the ability of the POTW delegated authority to set application fees and other fees necessary. That is also something that's often in a delegation agreement. But you also did that earlier when you did the delegation, partial delegation for municipal connections. You said that they could charge fees for their review. And so this is consistent with that. And not every fee that's underneath like a state program is a state fee that generates revenue for the body. It's like, there's fees for firewood at Farson Parks. That's basically a cost neutral. They buy it and they sell it and they don't make any money from that.
I wouldn't really call that a fee, but okay.
They call it a fee. Let me try to think of another one. Can't really think of one off the top of my head, but you do municipalities sometimes charge fees that are under state programs.
Any questions? Representative Norton?
Yeah, I just have, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question, and this is for you or a friend over at the Agency of Natural Resources, but how does it work currently? If I'm looking at I'm not questioning a change, one of the highlighted yellow changes, but one of the changes that we are adding actually appears on page, I'm not sure what it is in names. section 4, subsection 2, capital D, that says it will only issue permits for water service lines and sanitary sewer service lines where there is adequate capacity in the public water system.
Just say what page you're on, even if it's.
It's the old version, page 8 in the 1.1. It might be a little bit later than that because we've added some stuff earlier.
Page 8.
Page
Eight.
8.
Yeah.
Eight
New
of
one,
the-
that's page 8, line 6.
Okay. Oh, so it's only a couple lines there.
Yes.
Oh, sure. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so how do we do that currently? Without the delegation that this bill, S212, is offering, is that already being done, the assurance of capacity before we do anything?
Give us that.
Go for it.
Okay, currently, we require what's called an allocation letter from the municipality that says they have capacity, whether it's water or sewer or both. Both require an increase. And we don't issue our permit until they issue that letter. But some municipalities, it's just the board, the sewer board is issuing a letter. Other ones have their engineering staff, calculate the exact capacity of that spot on the system. It's a wide range of how people comply with that, but that's one of the intentions of the design manual. It's an explicit task to get a better definition of capacity, and that's because the stakeholders asked for that.
But is it already a statutory requirement? We're making it a statutory requirement now. Is it already a statutory?
Right.
It is.
Right.
Okay, they have
It's
that.
not already statutory, but it's in regulation.
Well, it is statutory for your wastewater treatment plant, right? Because if you're discharging to the surface waters, you need to, when you allow an activity, it needs to be compliant with your NIPD's permit, and you need to have the allocation for that.
Okay.
Right,
It's in
it's-
chapter 47. That
Yes,
could
it's in chapter 47, and it's not in the chapter. So
It's there.
there's an interface there.
Right.
That's all.
And some municipalities, I've heard testimony that some municipalities have a really difficult time determining capacity because of the state of their system, the age of their system. There might be leaks in their system. And so having more directive on what is capacity, how to determine it will be helpful, I think, to those
I have
municipalities.
exactly this question on some of the developments going on at Virgins right now. I'm touring the wastewater facility there on Monday. And I've already let them know I'm gonna ask that exact question. So hopefully he'll be on.
Well, we'll be curious to hear the answer
Yeah,
after your tour.
right.
Like,
If you'd like to join me, you're welcome.
yeah, I might.
Okay. 10 o'clock on Monday.
So those are the changes.
Okay.
So my directive is to come back with language regarding how the agency would propose to do a program for certification of wetlands professionals, including what criteria would be required, what they would be authorized to do.
Be the pros and cons.
Pardon?
What's the pros and cons? Like, what are
Okay.
the benefits and costs?
Okay.
And that's for 223, and then in 212. I don't know that we have any changes. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Well, there is an A&R proposal amendment to 212. Are we not considering that or?
What is that?
But Shane, our proposal?
This was a change to 212. Maybe I'm wrong. It was draft 2.147.
That's been incorporated.
That's already been incorporated.
That and Brian proposed language, and then the division has revised it, and you have the revised version of that language.
Thank you, Michael. That will adjourn for the day.